because there's a bit of a fine. Yes, Pekka, thank you very much for inviting me. Of course, I was a bit too enthusiastic to say immediately yes, and then my secretary corrected me that I was yesterday in Luxembourg and not here, so it was postponed for about a day, I think. But still, I'm here. Good memories of Finland, of Helsinki, of guest lecturing and having excursions. And yeah, I think it is interesting to talk about wood. I won't talk only about wood. I will explain you a little bit how we got to that moment that it's sort of changing our building industry. I would say we have many more changes to cope with, and I'm an architect, and I got more and more the feeling that I'm not working as an architect anymore. And I also get the feeling that architecture business is changing so much that, sometimes we say this is strictly speaking not architecture. We are doing something else, and we are forced to do something else by the market, by business, and that's sort of there the problem starts a little bit, because yes, we have a history, of course, in architecture, in building, in business, all that, but that history is, if you look into the big history of mankind, is extremely, it's a tiny little piece, and we all think that that is our religion nowadays, but I think we need to question that, otherwise we'll never change. For example, okay, you're missing a little bit of the, but it works. When it comes down to wood building, there is a very important moment in recent history, which is about yesterday, 70 years ago. We had a chance to change our building industry. And that had to do with World War II. There was shortage of materials because it was used for the war. There was an ending with a lot of destruction, a crying need for mass housing, because we had to build an incredible amount of housing for a society that was changing radically. And World War II showed us in many ways, in a way, there were very many hidden innovative ideas, even done by architects a lot. They worked for the military. They built sheds, they built splints like the eameses for broken legs. They experimented with whatever was needed for the war, also because there was no work in architecture, in building. And it was a very fruitful moment because they came up with many new ideas. The big problem was that after the war, people like Eames and Prouvé, they came up with amazing experiments in housing, very tactile, very intelligent, very subtle, very light, which means little materials. But there was also somebody else, or a couple of other guys like Camus and Cognet. They developed and patented this sort of prefab, big slab concrete building system. And Prouvé, for example, many years later said, well, you won, you dramatically won, because our systems, like the Eameses, like the case study houses, in fact, going back to the Citroën models of Le Corbusier, that was not wood, of course, but and Prouvé and Eameses were also not really wood, sometimes, yes, but also a lot of steel. But it was not so much about the material, it was about the intelligence, about the lightness, about the construction techniques that you can easily also use for wood. And Prouvé also used wood quite a bit. But those concrete prefab slab method building became the absolute standard, and the Russians, they housed, I think, 25 million people in those buildings within 10 years' time, 15 years' time. The French did, the British did, South America, they did it. So that became the very big standard in housing in almost global. And so we lost it, they lost it to that. But now we have a change in architecture, in building industry, you could say, again. We need to change. And it has to do with the unsustainable character of our building industry. And it has to do that with the fact that we have to rethink the way we live on this planet, including how we transport ourselves, how we house ourselves. We have to reinvent almost everything. And that has to do with this thing called the building, the industry, the business model that we have, a very unsustainable business model. I must say, in a way, I'm very skeptical. I'm very, I'm not really positive about that we're going to do it, and I'm dramatically negative about it in a way. And then I have said to myself, I stop it because I don't want to have a bad day every day. I'm just going to do it because that's another model. Business and politics nowadays is about talking about it, but not doing it. It's about postponing. It's about, saying, yeah, we need to reduce carbon emissions by 2050 with 50%. It's much easier to say that than to do it the next day with 1%. And that's what we don't do. Because if you make a future that is far ahead, then the first year you don't have to do so much. At least you can talk about it. And at least our politicians in Holland, they just talk about it. It's and we have a huge problem there. I felt this idea of change already quite a few years. And it turns out that if you work for 20 years and 25 years, you get a bit tired of repeating yourself exactly the same way in your own profession. So you would like to, I would like to sort of think it over and digest it and know what to do. So I started on a research. I said, I'm going to make a book and I'm going to finish it. I started in 2011, I think. No, well, I can print it in 2013, I thought. Well, not. I will do it this year. It took a bit longer. And it also became a bit bigger because I found so many interesting stuff. And the book is about, it's called Dig It, Buildings Bound to the Ground. We have a profession where we invent things, we build things, we make things as human beings. We make a lot of things, but there is one very special thing in architecture, in building, is that it is stuck to its site. And therefore it's also probably, it's mostly the only artifacts that we have on our Earth from 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,000 years ago that still exist. All the other stuff is gone, except for a few things. So our identity is completely entwined with buildings. Our identity as people goes along buildings. Like you're Finnish because of your buildings. We are Dutch because of our buildings. And you can't separate it anymore. It makes us who we are for a very, very big part. Of course you have language and art and all of that as well. But imagine taking away all the Finnish buildings and then change them into buildings from Kenya, and you would sit here and like, holy, you would feel lost. So we are extremely connected to our built environment and to our built history. And so my question was, how do we deal with that? And then through the history of building, I found out that we sort of took ourselves a bit away from the crust of the earth. We started to first dig in or build on top or use a few stones or a few branches or a few leaves or grass. And in time, we freed ourselves from that crust of the earth, from nature. In many ways, we thought we don't need nature anymore. We have to push it aside. We have to kill it. We have to use it to our own best interest. And of course now we are at a moment where we think, hey, wait a minute. I think we lost some, or we are going to lose something. So we need to reconnect. But over 11,000 years, we have sort of disconnected ourselves from our planet. And we found out that 1964, it's no coincidence that is my year of birth. But it's, of course, I just took that moment, but it's quite precisely between 1959, the first time we set off to the moon, but we didn't go to the moon. And 69, when we got on the moon, that 64 is exactly in the middle. It was in this process of leaving the Earth, almost at the moment that we've made the first photo seen from a distance to the Earth, that we could say, hey, that's us there. That amazing picture of the, not sunrise, but the amazing picture of Earthrise. It gives you goosebumps if you think about that. But it was also the only year in history of mankind that our growth of population was above 2% for 1 year only. So it grew to 2%, so we grew like hell, and then it dropped again. And it is a pivotal moment in nuclear thinking and in many, many other ways. It's also a moment where you could say the building was sort of isolated from its natural environment to the maximum. If you look at Arne Jacobsen's project Vattenfall, and there are many more from the 60s, it had nothing to do with this site. It was like put there. And it only uses the crust of the Earth for foundation, for gravity. There's no connection between inside and outside, except for that maybe the outside is like it's like a postcard window. That's it. So it was completely synthetic with ventilation, elevators, lights. At that moment we cut ourselves off. We thought we don't need it. It was the time that Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring, saying, hey, wait, I don't hear the birds anymore. Why is that? Well, DDT. And there were, of course, around that time, Club of Rome, everything happened around that time that we found out that progress is not the solution. Let's say we need to reinvent it started there, and over the last 50 years, to say it very bluntly, we haven't done shit. We have continued that, and there have been voices all the time, but we haven't done it. And there are, of course, thousands of reasons that we didn't do it. And we are now in a synthetic landscape that it has grown so extremely that it's going to, it hurts the globe. We know it, we know. I mean, enough about that. Well, to come back to Prouvé, he, for example, he used the techniques that he was talking about in the war, a little jeep, and this is his house. He just put it with some strips. He drove up the hill. He cleared a little site and he built it. It's extremely light. It's almost like it's a tent plus. It's a little bit more than a tent. Well, it's still there, and it's a gorgeous house. It's really beautiful. He didn't destroy site. He didn't excavate. He only cleared a bit. So you could say it's almost living like you could have lived with simpler techniques 6,000 years ago. So it didn't change that much. We could have continued like that, but we did not. This is what we did. This is sort of the first concrete invented building, and then later Zerfus, the French, like this. This is a Russian film. It's in fact sort of an opera. I don't know if you know the film Playtime by Jacques Tati. A beautiful film about, it criticizes, ridiculizes modern life. Where a woman looks at a poster in Paris and then she turns back, hey, that's London. The only difference is the bus, the green bus, but the architecture is exactly the same. Then she opens the door, and in the reflection of the door, you see the Eiffel Tower passing by. It's amazingly beautiful, of course. Well, it bankrupted Jacques Tati, that movie, but there was an earlier one, which is. With the music by Dmitri Shostakovich, who excused himself for the terrible quality of the music, but also it was an earlier movie, and it is like a hilarious idea of an explosives expert from Russia who, in the very end of the opera, he explodes his own dacha, his old house, and through the explosion he is catapulted on the balcony, and then he kisses his wife. As being, so this here at a certain moment he comes onto this balcony. Also a hilarious movie, quite brilliant. I'm not sure if Jacques Tati has seen it. Maybe he did, and then that was sort of. But this is reality nowadays. And then you can also question, well, how do we look at at things, plastic. We think completely different about this cup now than 2 years ago or 5 years ago. Traveling, about whatever, it doesn't matter. It's quite interesting because this was like the new world. This is how we're going to live. Philosophe, Le Corbusier. Recently I was there a couple of years ago. Amazing. I mean, like an amazing. It is the future. But this future never came. Not because of the quality of the architecture or the quality of light, etc. But life is, of course, much more complicated and much more interesting. It's used also by artists. Somebody called it. The name is, you read it. Mikkelsen. Asmund Hustin Mikkelsen, who put it in a lake where, as if this is of course not the real one, and it's used also like this. I mean, it isn't not deteriorated. This is just photoshopped by another artist, Dilleroy Xavier. So, but it says something that different artists have used savoir to sort of kill it in a way, and you could ask yourself why. So we have to rethink about materials quite a bit, and that's what this evening also is about. It's building. You say buildings in wood are better, or could be better, or maybe it's a solution. It's very much more a discussion about using other material than what? Steel, concrete. So I think there's much more behind that whole idea of let's promote wood. I think it's about let's promote another way of living. And you also see this Alto chair. On auction, I think it was like 8,000–9,000 euro. It's just a crappy chair of wood, you could say. You could look at it like that, let's say. But people pay a lot of money for that chair. Sorry?
Very difficult to sit.
That's all very relative. I'm talking about sitting, this one as well. But somebody paid 264,000 euro for this one. And of course you can ask yourself why. People aren't stupid. They don't pay that amount of money because they're stupid. Because it's a trap. Because they link something to this. How it is made, that it is cared for. So it's all extremely relative what material is about. And very interesting about things, products. There was this explosion of consumer products after the Second World War. And now we are almost dying in it. At least turtles are dying, and sharks and orcas are dying. Everybody is dying in everything we have, and we throw away. But you see, same period more or less, 50s, Leica. You still pay about 4,000 euro for it. It's also a damn good camera, and it has this beautiful analog way of working. I'm not nostalgic about analog at all, so don't misunderstand me. But there is something to this. It feels like wow to have it in a way, because you also have these cameras. They're in a certain way much better. Resolution-wise, not really, but it's handier. You can click, and it's digital. They cost like an average of 10 to 20 euro. So it's almost like scrap. Whenever you have a camera like this, this one you told all your family at that time. You were probably even going to your aunt and uncle to show your new camera. This one, your mother doesn't even know that you bought a new one. Huh? You got a new camera? Oh yeah. Bought it yesterday. So that our link to since we have so much, we don't cherish it that much. And I'm not saying you have to do it like that, but it shows that having less, in fact, gives you much more care. This is an interesting story. The Talbolago T26. Somebody paid 1.7 million for this one. You could say this side is in relatively good shape because this is the other side. They in fact paid that much money for the tag because they're going to restore it completely. But it's one of the rarest and oldest Talbos, but it's quite interesting. There is a lot of cherish. Nowadays, you can buy a much better car, second-hand Mercedes, everything in it. It costs about 1,100 euro. So it's extremely relative. And you see here, this is still cherished, or even many decades after it was built and experimented with the IMSIS. This is about care. But nowadays, this is about prefabrication. It was meant like this by many people, like the Rietveld, the Prouvé, the IMSIS. But this is what the industry made of it. Made it like this. They made it into commodity. How can I sell the cheapest house? How can I sell the most cubic meters for the lowest price? And I don't care how it ends, but I'm just trying to get us market share and whatever. And I don't know. I mean, come on. Where do you want to live? Come on. I mean, let's be serious. Let's try to kill this turkey. And the question is how? Because if we talk about this building in woods and about more sustainable and whatever, we need to be very careful that we don't fall in that same trap that the building industry takes it and then tweaks it and makes it into its own profit, and there we go again. We need to be much more intelligent of how we are going to do it, and not make it into commodity that is worth nothing and it's thrown away, but make it into something that we care for. As long as we don't care for something, we're going to waste it in 3-4 decades and then destroy it and build something new. And then that, of course, we will never be able to build a historical city, a city that we love or care for. So look, for example, to the ring around most of the old cities that are filled with the concrete housing or the warehouses and the infrastructure. All that, and almost, in fact, everybody agrees, all that they would rather see go. They say, yeah, we need it, but can't we do that in a different way? It's so ugly. And of almost all inner cities, modern and not modern people, they all tell, yeah, even if you're hyper-modern, you say, yeah, of course, you should keep Venice or Amsterdam. So what is the difference between those things, and how can we solve that problem in life? As I said, let's not try to fall into that trap of the 1950s, 60s, 70s building in concrete everywhere. Well, China's doing this. This is Angola. They just built this city in a couple of years. Because it's this trade for resources, for agricultural lands, etc. So they bring in their, in fact, they don't have to pay for this. But what they take, the Chinese, is then the land leases, the agricultural, all the stuff that they can take out of the ground in Angola. So it's an extremely devastating trade. We have to be very careful. This, for example, is a detail, and you see that there is, I mean, let's stop that. Look at the balconies. You know? First of all, you can drop through this immediately, but you can't get on it. It's like, this is not a model or something. It is really a photo. It's a still from a film by the BBC who is driving through it. Nobody wants to show it. It's a ghost town. Nobody lives there. They have hard times to sell it. It looks really, so it's a business model. And I think we first have to kill that and then talk about how we're going to build. So I think talking about let's build more in wood is, for me, I can tell you, and we can all agree here, and it will never happen. It will only happen if we change the rules in this world. And if we change the rules, then we are going to be able to change the way we build and live, etc. You do need a level playing field for the whole world, more or less, or for the whole Western world, or to be able to do that. Otherwise, there's always somebody who, sneaks around the corner and says, I can do it cheaper. So now there's this whole trade between, so it's about infrastructure. China is investing a lot in infrastructure. They connect the rest of the world with China. So they build these things. This is a national park in Africa. So you would have here the stampedes of the big elephant foots in this park, and now you have the stampede of Chinese concrete pillars there. It's quite cynical. How we deal with that? First of all, as I said, it's quite troubling times that to be able to work in a way that it is also morally and ethically sort of okay. Because many clients are in it for the profit. They are in it for the building share, for the share, for the market share. And at least in Holland, architecture is pushed out completely. So now it's a business model, and then, okay, sometimes they need an architect to do it. But quite often, as long as they have found out how to do it really cheap and really fast, they don't need that architect anymore. They just do it without. They copy, paste, they multiply. But we have been extremely lucky that we also have found private clients to do special stuff, or commercial hoteliers, I will show you in a minute, where either the client or the municipality simply, and that's what really happens, simply says, you can only build this hotel here. There's a hotel stop in Amsterdam. You're not allowed to build hotels here, for example, unless it is extremely sustainable and it adds something to the city, and you tell me why. And then you see people start to think in a different way, because they know they can't build the simple concrete steel hotel. This is all what we did. Project from really small to really big. 10, 12 square meters kiosk in Amsterdam, and then big projects up to 110,000 square meters. And then, yeah, how is wood in this? I mean, with wood comes also prefabrication, because this sort of, in situ timber constructions are extremely rare. So it is also about, and that is in a way a very interesting change, that the idea of the house as a machine, as Corbusier intended, or Prouvé, or Eames, it never really set off. It never really ignited a real change. But nowadays, with the robotized construction methods and CNC phrases and much smarter factories, the whole computerization of building brings it in much more. I mean, we have a few advantages now to do build in wood, instead of in this old-fashioned pouring concrete thing with a lot of dust and a lot of CO2 production. So there are a few advantages. That is good, at least. We found out that these are all the projects from black, there is no wood whatsoever in it, to completely white, that it's only made out of wood. And this is a timeline of our projects. It was 1992. And this is 2019. And you see that it's getting whiter. So we are doing much more in wood and prefabrication nowadays. There's a real shift. And there was in fact here, a first project that ignited in me, at least, this sort of love for wood in building. I mean, love for wood. I grew up in the forest. Yes, it's very nice, but I didn't think of it like that very specifically. And then we built our first CLT house, Vals, and that was really nice. And since then we said to ourselves, let's do more in this. And now it's setting off. And to us, Hotel Jakarta, in our little school, it's a shitty little project. It's not that interesting. We built it from first sketch until opening in 11 months. I've never done something so fast. There are quite a few mistakes in it. It's a temporary building. It's a building for 40 years, but on a temporary location. It can be moved. So I'm really proud of it, how simple it is. Well, it started like this, with simple, as I said, that this is the first project, cars on a roof housing. our Europan project, we built it immediately. I don't know if you know about it. Europan is like a European competition for young architects, and then if you win, you might build it. Well, we were lucky to build it. And here we changed the world also a bit. We didn't put this very expensive car park under the ground in Holland, which is very expensive. We just made an elevator and put it on the roof. Which was kind of fun. And we started to reuse elements, like this is a sewage treatment facility, sewage tanks, and they asked us to do 6, 7 urban villas here and destroy everything. We convinced the client not to destroy it, but to build much more compact and make a park and more high-rises instead of urban villas and taking out. They thought really that we were nuts, but they said, you can't live in a sewage treatment facility. You can't live in a poop tank. Well, you can, and people like it now a lot. These are the most expensive apartments in this area. Because we just cut it open and we said it has an extremely strong foundation, so we can use the stability and the foundations, and then we build something and that's it. So it's sort of fun to do it. And they thought it was not fun because the neighbors across the street, they came in with baseball bats and they kicked out the construction workers the first day. They were so mad that the sewage tanks would stay instead of go. But also the funny thing is that these same people that had to be separated by police from the construction workers, 2 years later, they opened the project. They loved it. They changed their mind completely. And I was extremely proud of that we were able to convince them in the very end that this is sort of fun. And now they have this amazing park in front of them. A park with some sculptures in it. Here we also started with prefabrication, that you were able to sort of do-it-yourself house, that you could use blocks and terraces and things. We didn't know where it ended. And this was the first thing we built with wood, oak wood structure in sort of big trusses, big cantilevers. We thought this was a very sustainable building because we used heat regeneration, etc. Now, 15 years later, 20 years later, I laugh about it because I mean, the sustainable qualities of this building are completely outdated. But at least it brought us somewhere. It started something that we like very much. This is the structure, partly steel, partly wood. And that is what it ends up probably anyway in the building industry in the very end. We will always use steel as well, and we have to go a long way to really abandon those kind of materials. But it's also about a collaboration, I think. Since we're living with 7 billion people on this planet, in the near future 10 billion, there is never one solution that's the good one. Is it electric driving? No, it's probably not only electric driving. It's a combination of things. Because whenever you say, oh, soya beans are right, then 5 years later we find out that planting so much soya beans, it turns out it's not right. So in large quantities, nothing works anymore. I think we have to make a construction that is extremely much smarter. It's about smartness. So this was the first real, let's say, wooden building where we didn't know what to do. We started with, the client said, I would like to have a wooden house. So we took these CLT plates and we played around a little bit. We nested it in their methods, and we came up with this house. In fact, that's why my office is called Search. We really are, you could say we don't know nothing. We are sort of stupid. We like to design. But we research, we are detectives. Whenever they ask us something, we really go deep into it and we come with a solution. It's about the doing thing. So invest time and talk to producers, etc., until we have the solution. So it's extremely about asking the right questions, a lot of questions. Not only the right, also the stupid ones. Ask questions and try to find a solution out of a problem. So we experiment a lot, we research a lot, and then we find that solution. I hope I do not offend anybody here, but we have in our office with the projects we're always doing, quite often you get these first meetings and then they are introducing the experts. I hate that word, experts. I always have problems with the experts because they have such a narrow-minded view on one topic that they are experts in, that they don't oversee, let's say, the complexity of life and like a new solution in something. So I prefer not to work with experts, but I like to work with curious people that have a curious mind and that know that. So if you know, this is the same with clients that come in. I'm really into quality of building. Then we know already, oh, he's not. Because, or if it is about money, if you say something, it doesn't mean you do it. So I think it's extremely interesting to work with people that have a certain obsession for something. Because you also have clients, and that we see a lot, that have an obsession for finding a new way of building, and those people are quite interesting. They do that same sort of they have the same sort of curiosity and search for a new thing. This, for example, is a family. It's a different house, the next house, where they wanted to destroy the old barn and build a completely new house. And they had a design already, and their kids said, "Well, we don't like it, Mom and Dad. It's a terrible house." So they said goodbye to their architects, and they tried to find a new one. Came to me. I said, "Yeah, okay. If you kids say that, I can make a sketch for you, and then see if they like it, and then maybe we continue." So we proposed this idea of keeping the old house, and really literally bending open the roof, and therefore extending it a bit, making it larger from 200 to 500 square meters, and so make sort of fun out of that old house. This is the old. It's called een vierkant, a square farm. We use the old vierkant to become sort of a strange middle of the house. Well, as you see, the kids liked it, so we built it. We even made the floor sort of fluid concrete. And here again, the parents hated it, but the kids liked it. So we were able to build it. Say, you can't do anything there. I said, well, come on, you've got 500 square meters. You can have 10 square meters of fun in your house. And of course, you never know how it ends up. But then the client was so proud that he found this hanging chair. So, I can still use that square meters. I said, you're top. Then they found out that it was really, really handy, that little hill, because if the dog has been outside and it's wet, they hate the fact that he's running in and messing all around. Now, when he comes in with his wet feet, he slips and he can't get up until his feet are dry. So he came to me and said, it's really handy, that slope. So you see, life is always, sort of stranger than you think. But it's like paradise here, I think. So this is how we sort of deal with a problem where a client had already schemes of other architects and couldn't solve it, and it was too big and too expensive and too complicated. We simply brought it down to one small chalet, let's say one compact chalet. The rich people nowadays, they build these sort of multifaceted chalets, like a car crash of 10 small houses. It looks terrible. A car lover. He had problems. The solution here lied in the fact, simply not in the house, not in the architecture. But he needed to have a road up to here up, because this is the entrance side of the house. And then he has to clean that road in the winter himself. It's very expensive. And he has these Porsches he likes to race. I said, this problem with all that snow, I don't know how to solve it. And we found out, said, well, just build the garage at the other end of your plot, because there's a road as well. We take an elevator up, sort of James Bond, very nice. Well, since then he was wax in my hand, like wax. He loved it. It's also he didn't understand that we put a stair in front of his view, his most beautiful view. You know, see, but and then that's of course our sort of cliche as architects, that you would like to have a nice kind of sculptural quality of the front of the house at the back as well. But since he uses it very much, it has a functionality that he did not understand, but now he knows, because this is his private apartment, this is all the communal spaces, and here this is for guests, 14 beds. So he can also go in the attic and have a quiet evening. So they use those stairs quite a bit. So we continued our search for new constructions. This is Denmark, quite some time ago already. And again, experimenting with an idea of 10,000 square meters enlargement and still having the old barn as the main building up there. And again, we played around with CLT and wood constructions to come up with a solution that pays a tribute to this sort of wooden barns that you have everywhere in Denmark. So that was a bit what we did around construction in wood. It went everywhere. It didn't have a real sort of perspective. But yes, it's an extremely nice material to work with. You have a lot of freedom. You can tweak it, you can change it, you can glue it. Here we did in Bahrain a small project, a small library. We wanted to make a beautiful wooden facade. Well, sometimes it goes wrong, because here they made it in sort of a fiber concrete. They changed it completely. And then, yeah, I mean, it's sort of okay. But it would be nice to make this building much more intelligent, because they don't insulate buildings. You need to insulate buildings, not for the warmth going out, but for the warmth not getting in. So we wanted to make a building without ACs. Or very simple, prefabricated. This is a synagogue that we built with mostly simple off-the-rack building elements that you can get in Holland. It was quite a cheap building. And we saved all the money for the shul, for the main synagogue space, to wrap it completely in wood. That's more or less a 7-arm chandelier. Or we hide buildings in the mountains in Switzerland. A highly sustainable, dug-in quality. That's a bit also why we took the title Dig It. You need to sort of understand what you can do. So these projects, many of these projects were impossible in woods, although we also tried to promote it. For example, here, with a beautiful wooden attic. Imagine that everybody would live in this attic space, which is quite romantic, of course. But then you come around and it becomes aluminium and concrete. So you see, it's a massive building industry, and it has an enormous power. And then the question is how to tweak that. Well, then you can get a client that says, I want to have a new hotel, although hotels are not allowed anymore. But let's build something that adds a quality and that is highly sustainable and that is also built in a different way. So we did this tender, and we won because of our approach on this. Maybe some of you know there is this amazing hotel, New York in Rotterdam, that the ships left to the east. And in Amsterdam, to the west, to New York. And in Amsterdam, there's the same location. And I said, let's make your pendant, which is the hotel where the ships left to the east, to Indonesia. And let's team up with the Hortus Botanicus. So the whole idea was not only about wood, it's about linking your building with a history of Amsterdam and Jakarta, of linking with a history of colonization and decolonization. So we came up with the idea of building 180 units of full wood of the 200 rooms. There are a few rooms that you can't build in wood because we needed to tip it off and to add some corners. It was impossible. But here, like 80-90% of the rooms are prefabricated units, completely finished, and then hung in, and then tacked on. It's sort of a plug-and-play hotel room. And see where we can get. And with this client, it was amazing because he said A, but he also said B, C, D. He really continued in this whole idea. And we used the idea of a perimeter, one corridor, but then only on one side the rooms, because it is a very complicated site. Keeping open a huge space here that you can fill with auditoria and the banqueting hall and the swimming pool and etc. But having no daylight, we said, oh, let's not do it. Let's just fill it out until we are there, and then we keep it open. We maybe use this idea of a little piece of Indonesia in here, this small jungle, and let's see how that can help the quality of life in that building. It started at that, and we made this one scheme for the competition period, and it is amazing. This is one of the few buildings that we didn't change after 5 weeks of designing. It is exactly what we designed in 5 weeks. It was built like that, no changes. It maybe became only better in a way. It has 1,700 square meters of PV cells, so it is energy neutral completely. And it's built in a very different way, and because of it is built in a very different way, it looks also very different. Not because it is designed like this, but simply because it is engineered like that. And we said when we built with cross-laminated timber rooms, there was one thing for us that was extremely important. We want to see it, not hide it behind gypsum boards or paint it or whatever. We need to see it, to show it. So it's built with over 2,000 cubic meters of pine. And then we have finished it off, as in Indonesia, with all the finishings are bamboo. A fast-growing material, very recyclable. So this was the drawing we made during competition phase, and that is exactly the way it is. So it wraps around a high bridge, comes down here, and then it's to the low quay and goes down under the bridge. It all connects at that level, and in these differences of levels, we have this sawa, this sort of stepped garden, where you now have amazing water views, harbor views. Teaming up with the Hortus Botanicus for a subtropical garden. That's very good for the climate qualities, climatic qualities inside, in terms of humidity and air, etc. And here you see all the bamboo being used there. And since we opened up the whole thing in the middle, for example, normally all the swimming pools in Amsterdam hotels are in the basement. We were able to push it up, creating a quality. That's, by the way, also used by the people living in that neighborhood. You can just buy a ticket and swim. It has a bakery. So it links itself not only to Indonesia, but also to the neighborhood and to Amsterdam, and to the history of Amsterdam. So this is, for us at least, the first time that we completely changed the way we collaborate with engineers, using them from the very first day. We did it completely prefabricated. And so building up this system altogether, and as of this table structure of concrete with the parking garage, as of that floor, it's all structurally wood, so there is no other material that keeps it up to 30 meters. And you see them being hoisted in. And funny enough, you see that building on site for the lower levels took about 1 year. I was quite amazed. And then they were able to hoist in this in 10 days. So then you saw in 10 days, brrr, it was all there. But since it was finished in the factory, it was also finished. And then they wrapped around this facade of glass, quadruple glazing. So this was all built in the factory. We used a very thin layer of concrete for, how do you call it, fireproofing, soundproofing in weight. But we needed only 1/4 of the normal weight because we also have we have wooden ceilings in every room. On that base we have cooling and heating in that floor. So it's like a smart slab. And there goes all the material of wood in, also carrying the balcony, triple glazed window, bathrooms, single glazed balconies and PV cells that can be hoisted in like this with the standard units. And as said, the suites, the most expensive rooms in the tip had to be made in situ. They could not do that because of stability in wood. So that very last tip is made differently. And we topped it off with a sky bar. It feels like a glass house. So we're going to put in trees and a hanging garden. That's what we're going to make here. So for us, it's quite amazing how much questions this ignited from other clients from Holland and Germany and France. I think we're having excursions here about 4 times a week already for more than a year. So where it brings us, I don't know, but it's amazing to see how many people are interested in this sort of change. And I think that's the most important thing. That we don't push it, but that we in fact wait for them to come to us and say, yes, you better do it this way. So these kind of projects now pop up where they want to experiment and try to make this sort of healthy urban quarter in a sort of wooden towers. Where this ends up, I don't know, but the engineering will take quite some time. But at least the first project that we also tendered and won is this one that we are now going to do in fully wood, 60 apartments. I think it will be a hell of a job since apartment building in Amsterdam is extremely cheap. So your building costs are extremely low, although prices are high, but most of the money goes to the municipality for land lease. It's a very rotten system in a way, because whatever you want to put into quality of building is taken away and goes to land lease. But we're now working on this very hard. And also in hotels where in very difficult areas along the coast, where we are asked to work in the same type of building industry, type of building system. This is a beautiful dune area. There's now an old hotel that uses an amazing amount of oil in its heating system. It's worn out, the rooms are bad, and they want to just tear it down and build a new hotel. And everybody is against it, but we are now a couple of steps further, and the people living in that little village are in a way very happy, because we also implement a lot of extra services for them. For example, the supermarket is gone. There are no restaurants anymore. There's nothing. And here comes a restaurant, a bar, a shop, a swimming pool, a spa. So you can keep up the services of a small town. And we want to build this also in prefabricated units. This, for example, is an existing element in that dune already. We are not building it ourselves, but we're going to refurbish it. And then here on the place of the old hotel, we want to rebuild a new one. bringing back about 1,000 square meters of dune landscape by making it much more compact. We have learned a lot about how to organize the building site in a way, because that demand is extreme in Holland. It's about speed and it's about money. By quite surprisingly, next to our office, this is my office, there was a vacant plot for 10 years already, and we have experimented a bit with our landlord to do something there, and we ended up in not office buildings, but then small units for starters, like people who just have a job and can rent a room of 28 square meters. It's very small, it's very expensive in Amsterdam. So we made small starter units. And there is no money for it. So the question is then, how can you make something that is prefabricated, that is in fact like a container building, but how can you make it in such a way that it's even better than standard housing? So here we said we need to make a second layer, a bit like, that's what we call it North Orleans, not New Orleans, it's in Amsterdam North. Let's try to get this sort of romantic idea of your outdoor space. Since you have such a small unit, let's at least make a balcony, fire escapes, and on the other side you have the gallery to enter your house, so that we can wrap it around with a skin at least, so that it maybe looks a bit better than this standardized container. And it's quite scary to see, because we make, like, in my opinion, sometimes amazingly nice project. Nobody reacts. We don't see clients coming in like, hey, I would like that as well. We built this. I'm a bit sort of, yeah, sorry, it's very cheap, but we try to make something out of it. Clients come in every week. They want this. So it's a very strange, that's what I'm saying about building industry. Whenever they see something that they think, oh, that's cheap, I can make a lot of money then with it, they come to you. So their objectives are completely different as ours. So you have to be very careful to maintain that quality and to keep up the spirit. Mostly the ground floor is completely built because it's rentable space then for them. We have said no, we're going to keep that garden. It's holy. You see how it was built. It's a very simple system. And this, we would like to continue this experiment with better materials, better quality. The good thing is that being able to service young people with a unit like this, with a high quality interior, all the services and the balcony and good light and a beautiful view on the river. I feel ashamed for the size of it, but in the other hand, it is like it was full immediately and people love it. So who am I to say okay? But it's quite interesting to see these sort of changes. So up to here it's completely industrial, and then this is this wrap around this skin. That has brought, at least in our neighborhood, we had a lot of burglaries, a lot of breaking into Aalto cars, and in my office as well. Well, since this is there, it stopped. That's also quite important in life, isn't it? Well, thank you very much.
Okay, before we change to while Mika stretches his legs, we have time for some questions. Any ideas that is raised up?
Would you like to do questions now, or?
We can do it later as well. Anyway, I will ask you something. You, by the way, broke your rules or changed the rules. You spoke about architecture, but I got at least one more rule for me from you, that you should have at least 10 square meters of fun in every building.
Yes, definitely.
Any more? You can
if you are creating something new and you are in the marginal, how to make it mainstream, or is it always in marginal? Or
yeah, I think that's a rather good question, because that is exactly where architecture, building, differs from all the other. Because mass production will never be like the new iPhone multiplied a billion times, or the Tesla, or the. So then you can invest massively in a new system, and then it sort of starts. And we were exactly this week talking about finding an investor or client who is willing to build at least the first 3, 4, 5 projects with a loss, but that it is so good that it starts to attract clients, that it starts to attract people who want to continue. We need to, it's absolutely true, we need to invest much more in these projects in order, like the Hotel Jakarta did it a bit, because there we see that people are so interested that they really want to invest in this system that you multiply. But we want to do it the other way. We want to invest much more first in the engineering of things, in wood, in structure, in spatial qualities. A friend of mine, for example, he just built his own house completely out of wood. And yes, up there, his house has an extremely nice climate. It feels really nice, that house. But for him, it's also very difficult to find clients who want that kind of house. Quite often they come to him, he shows them around, they say, oh yeah, nice, nice. They go away, take another architect, steal a few things, but do it their own way. So you need to find you need to design a business model where you get enough money to do massive research and development and build it extremely good and say, this is it. I think you can't change that. This is the best thing, at least for now, in this generation, in this kind of solutions. Because that is in fact what, Steve Jobs did it. He had this idea of this one, and he nailed it down to the last 10th millimeter until it was the way he thought it was good. And that has become the new standard. And I think Elon Musk does the same. Strange guy, but he doesn't make a car. He reinvents transport. He's not thinking about a car. I just bought one last year, and it feels really not like a car. It feels like something else. And that is, I think, really smart if you can do that. If we would be able to do that in building industry, let's not make this, the building is quite, every time you go to a building site, it's like, why the hell do we do it in such an old-fashioned way? 30% goes wrong, the glass doesn't fit, this, everything. And then we have this BIM modeling, and we do it, engineer it, still goes wrong. But so we need to find a way where we do it much smarter, that we say, much cleaner. This is it. But yeah, we're looking for that client.
Thank you for a really interesting presentation. I'm just thinking whether architects should be more active in developing or inventing projects and concepts, and instead of waiting for a client to come to them, come up with concepts and kind of try to find a client to fit the concept.
That's an answer to my previous answer. Yes, you're completely right. We need, but especially in Holland, it's quite troublesome. I'm known in Holland a bit as they say, a difficult architect, and simply because I don't want. I want clients to, and that's what you see with the young officers. They get a commission for a preliminary design or sketch design only nowadays, and then they're kicked out. And all these old collaborators of my office, they can't even feed themselves from the work they get. So it's being an architect, and it's almost dying out. I said, come on guys, we need to stand up against this, and we need to find a way to keep our profession alive and to come up with this new business model. That's absolutely true. We see it in some countries where they can do it because their fees, for example, are so much higher. I think, yeah, my fee in Holland is about 1/4 of my fee in Luxembourg. 1/4. So with the project we do abroad, we are able to save a bit of money to do those kind of investments ourselves. But what I see now is that if you want to make it really good, I think you need like 10-15 million to come up with really good thing, which is still cheap, because I think a brand new car, if you have a new line of a car with Volkswagen or costs about 1 billion. 1 billion. That's why they are so damn good. Because they really make it very well, and then they multiply it like 500,000 times. And that is where architecture is different, building is different. Except for, as I said, the 1950s, the prefabricated concrete slab method. They also nailed it down, and therefore it was so simple, and at that moment it worked, that it was multiplied 500,000 times. Or 500 million times. And that kind of twist we need to find, and we have to be, that's why I say we have to be very careful, because in history it is always, it started by designers and then it was taken away and the industry took it over. And there we need to mitigate much more, I think. We need to keep it much more to us and say, this is it. But if I would have the solution, I would not be here, because then I would be too busy to do it. I don't really know how to.
You have mentioned business model and money so many times, so maybe we'll give the floor to guy whose job is to talk about business models and money.
Okay, thank you very much, and good evening. I hope you are not falling asleep, because it's quite late already. But actually, I'm not an architect. I'm not an expert in construction, but I'm trying to, perhaps towards the end of my presentation, I'm trying to present something that answers to you, Pekka, how to make this niche mainstream. But I don't know if I'm successful in that. But anyway, this is almost the only nice picture I have here. You had so many that I'm skipping the pictures now. Does anyone have any idea what that building is, by the way? Now, we are talking about tall wood buildings in the Nordic states. So, what might that be? Or where might that be? Okay, I think that should be the tallest wood building in Europe, or perhaps in the world at the moment. It's from Norway, and Metsä Wood, as you see, is one of the suppliers for that, and it's 18 floors high, so quite high compared to many of the wood houses, old wood houses that we see there on the streets in many Nordic cities. Okay, but as I told you, I'm a generalist, and the reason why I am here is perhaps in this report. We were working on this subject, tall wood buildings in Nordic countries, especially in Finland and Sweden, for 2 years ago with Finnish Environment Institute. So actually when I say we, I refer to Aalto University, School of Business. And We had some international partners too. The most important of them was the University of Lund from Sweden. And I sort of was personally responsible for the part that focused on tall wood buildings. We had two other interesting cases or case businesses too. One of them was textile and fashion, and the third one was biorefineries, or as you might call them, two pulp mills. Okay, but then let's start. So, a very brief history of tall wood buildings in the Nordic countries. Fire safety is not an issue for me personally, but when I began to talk to ordinary people on the streets about what comes to their mind in terms of tall wood buildings, everybody was talking about how about fire safety, fire safety, fire safety. So, but as you can see, it's not technically it's not a problem anymore, but it remains in the public mindset. So it takes some time to correct these preconceptions of sort of less fire safe buildings, because they are not less fire safe. I would say that they are even more fire safe than many other buildings. Okay, but since 1990s we have had several policy strategies or things like that, and also research action that we can say that supports this industry or emergence of tall wood buildings in the Nordics. And well, what have I? Yes, of course, we have had pioneering projects too that are important to mention. Okay, but then I think most of you share the view with me that we are, at the moment, we are sort of living in the middle of a Nordic wood construction paradox, because when we go out, we can see trees everywhere. We are living surrounded by parks and close to trees, and surveys say that people like wood as a construction material. But in tall buildings, wood has not been a successful material so far. And in terms of market share, we can say that concrete is very dominant, both in Sweden and in Finland. I wouldn't like to say any numbers, but I think that the market share of concrete is something like 80%. Am I correct? Have you any idea?
In multi-story buildings in Finland, the market share for concrete is 95%.
95. Oh, it's even more than I guessed. Okay, but then what I'm trying to show you today is sort of presenting something related to these two questions, so that why did we end up in this situation? And of course it's the fire safety issue, but there are some other reasons too. And then towards the end, we can also talk about, are we getting up from there? Or is there any possibility? Or do we need to get up? That's also a relevant question sometimes. Okay, so now this is a very sort of statistical and scientific presentation compared to the other. So I'm presenting you here some findings from the analysis that I found in mainly those two sources, puinfo.fi and Ministry of Employment and the Economy. And the reminder there tells you that this is now about tall wood building projects. So we forget one-family houses, log houses, summer cottages, and things like that. So they are included here. We are not talking about blocks of flats and office buildings and hotels and constructions like that. So the data now here comes mainly from Finland, because we couldn't get similar data from Sweden. And now that we are in Finland, I think Finland is the most interesting place for most of the audience. So, and I haven't used the latest updates here, so the data is mainly before 2017. So if you want to see the latest updates of this Puuinfo, for example, you can go to their website. But I have been analyzing these tall wood building projects in terms of location of the project, start year, and of course year of completion, and number of floors, number of flats, the principles, so the organization behind the project, the design and planning actors, so architects and others, and then the material suppliers, and then the construction companies involved. So let's get started. First, some macro statistics here. That is not so interesting, but anyway, the number of finished flats in multi-story buildings in Finland was or is something like 17,000 per year, says Statistics Finland. And in order to materialize the goal of the previous government of about 10% market share for wood buildings, so we should have had something like 1,700 flats per year in tall wood buildings. But what did we have? Pekka knows the answer at least. So we could say that that's in multi-story wood buildings, so more than 2 floors, it's less than 1%. So that's the sad fact. I would say sad, because I would like to see more tall wood buildings, personally. Okay, then according to year of completion, we can see that we have sort of a U-curve here, so that in the beginning, before the millennium, before 2000, we had 7 projects, and after that, so one period here is about 4 or 5 years. So we can see that there is a slight decline in the number of projects until 2010. And then after that, we can see growth starting from 2011. So this is, I think, personally, this is very interesting to consider. What's the behind? What are the reasons behind this change, or first this decline and then the growth, or could we say the boom already? If we have 17 projects, is it a boom compared to 1 or 2? Okay, but anyway. These are my personal considerations now, that what factors could perhaps explain the decline there after year 2 or around year 2000. So perhaps it's still regulation issue. So people were still thinking about this fire safety issue. It might be a technological issue. So the solutions for wood construction, they were less developed, and so was know-how, structures, things like that. So it's also about costs or price of the building. So I have the impression that they were quite expensive solutions at that time. And of course, then we can take the mindset of construction industry. So we can say that interest is not that high. It still isn't very high. And values are rather conservative. And then we can also think of a term that can be called path dependency, meaning that the construction industry has invested very heavily in know-how and other things related to concrete, and this is very hard to change, or it takes time to change that. Yes, and of course competition from other basic materials, this is something that we have already talked about. And then also mindset in the market. I think the fact is that when we have only a few examples or good benchmarks available, it has an impact on the mindset in the market. So nobody wants to have or live in a wooden flat until you see that there are enough of good examples, successful examples. Okay, this is the first part of the evolution. But then after 2010, so this decade, again my own considerations, what might be the reasons behind the little growth or even boom here in the industry during the 1910s. So I think this fire safety regulation change is now starting to work, actually, especially in Sweden, but also here in the mindsets of people. And then also we have had some technological developments, for example, modularity and material innovations like cross-laminated timber. They are already available now. And also price, it's not so costly anymore. Then we have ecological factors that were not so important around 2000. But now people realize that this has also something, or perhaps this has also something to do with climate change mitigation. Then, as I already mentioned, we have had government level support, strategic programs and organizations like that. And then we already had some good examples available. So we had some completed flagship projects and positive publicity for those projects available. And perhaps also we had some kind of market pull already, so that consumers' preferences and demand for tall wood buildings was starting to grow. And also one thing that I would consider quite important is public procurement, because if I think of the project, so public housing organizations were behind many of these projects during this decade, and I think that's one very important factor. Okay, this about the development during the last few decades or years. But then what kind of challenges are involved in the evolution of the industry? And now I'm going to take perspectives, several perspectives here by actor, so that we start, or first we take location, of course. In case Finland, I think we have a challenge because we have no clear sort of pioneer area or hub in Finland that we could say that is leading the change or leading the business in terms of tall wood buildings, so that we could say that it drives the development here. And we can take an example from Sweden. Växjö is often mentioned as a good example of such a hub or place where you can see several benchmarks and several good projects available already. So in Finland, Helsinki region seems to be the kind of a hub, but still we don't have so many projects or benchmarks or showcases available here. I have picked up here some, for example, Finforest office in Tapiola. Then we have Suomen Luontokeskus Haltia, which was completed with CLT technology. And then a couple of years ago, we had housing fair in Vantaa, and there Reponen built the biggest wooden residential building in Europe in 2015, and I think that's a very good benchmark too in terms of market development. But anyway, we are sort of lacking a driving force here in terms of pioneer area or hub. But in Helsinki region we have some good examples available already. Okay, then one perspective that concerns also architects, and I could find that there were 50 architect agencies and other design and planning actors identified there in the data during those 20 years or something. And now there's a challenge, or I think as an organization researcher I see a challenge here, because in terms of learning and know-how development, it looks a little bit weird that most of the identified actors seem to have references from only one or two projects. So it doesn't develop your know-how and sort of we are talking about learning curves, for example. So you are still on a quite low level on your learning curve, and we could say that such projects are more like experiments or pilots. It's not sort of industrial level work yet. I've had some names there, but I think we will skip them because time is running. And then the next perspective is about material suppliers, and I think the challenge here is that it looks like the material suppliers, they don't have very much cooperation between each other. So everybody is working. We have sawmills and we have other organizations. We have very huge Stora Enso and some others, but they are not cooperating very much. At least it looks like that from the surface, because I didn't go inside the projects, but from the surface it looks like this, that there is not that much cooperation. But anyway, it seems that Stora Enso's CLT, cross-laminated timber-based modular multi-story concept is sort of leading the change. Do you, Pekka, agree?
Yeah, and Petri.
Oh, sorry. Pekka and Petri. Okay. So, but we have some other actors there too, and perhaps we are seeing some more cooperation in terms of material supply and material development in the future. Related to material supply, I'm a little bit concerned about the recent debate on the availability of wood in the future. And now if you can read this is a quote from Professor Karjalainen in Metsälehti a couple of years ago. So even if all the current multi-story apartment production, approximately 15,000 flats per year, would use CLT, it would take only 14 hours to produce this demand with the present forest growth in Finland. So this is not an issue. So we have a lot of raw material available, but still it sort of confuses me that there are so many differing views on forests as a carbon sink and so on. So I would like to make this, if I were a dictator, I would say that now decide what is the truth. But we have heard that different research institutes have differing views on this, and how much can we cut so that we can say that sustainable, that annual lodgings are, or harvesting is sustainable and so. But anyway, I would like to stress that this is ultimately this is not a problem. But anyway, I would like to see this in a more clear way in the future. Yes, I'm very worried about the discussion, because this may confuse also the consumers and the market. Because in reality we have a lot of material available compared to the volume that is needed. Because you don't see the little figures there, but this tells us that most of the raw material goes to pulp and paper production and exports. So this is not a problem, how much wood we use in construction. And there is, certainly there is enough in the Nordic countries. Okay, and then about construction companies. One challenge again, the similar challenge that we saw with architects and other planning actors. So it looked like that most of the actors here in construction, they seem to have references from only one or two projects. So again, this is something that we can say that it's an experiment or it's a pilot. And then another interesting fact here is that in the beginning, during the first years, there were mostly small companies or smaller companies involved. But now, in the 1910s, so during the recent years, we see more and more, you see big players like Lemminkäinen, Peab, Skanska, SRV, YIT, and players like that. So this reminds me of some theorization about industry evolution, so that in the beginning it's normal that there are small companies, sort of Davids, and then during the evolution also Goliaths become interested in the issue, and this is very much true also in evolving sustainable businesses. So this comes from the research of sustainable businesses, but I think it fits quite well here too. Okay, then one more perspective, point of view of building owners and users. And when I was talking to real estate investors, it became evident that they don't care so much about the material. What they care about is return on investment, and their view is that if we want to improve the attractivity and profitability of tall wood building investments, the projects should be built in central locations. And at the moment, we have Wood City in Jätkäsaari in Helsinki, for example. That's a good example of central location, but mostly they are like in suburban areas like Viikki and Kivistö and so that. So real estate investors seem to think that it's too far away from the city. It should be in the center or around railway stations and places like that. And then we were also considering the role of flat owners or users or dwellers or how you want to call them. And we were thinking that there should be more dialogue with these users or potential users, so that you sort of understand and respect their needs and preferences already when you start the project. But I think it's very often it's so that people just move in and then we think that it's okay like that, but it isn't. So there should be some kind of user engagement available, or more sort of dialogue between the project and the potential users. Okay, then one more fact. So this is, I think, pretty obvious that wood building projects are becoming bigger and the houses are becoming bigger and taller. little by little. But what can we then conclude about this? And this is again the same building that I showed in the beginning. So this is from Norway. And it's said to be the tallest at the moment, but I haven't verified. Yes, okay. So I have a chart here that should remind you that during the life cycle of a building, there are many kinds of actors that are needed or that have something to do with the project. So from wood material suppliers to architects to real estate developers, investors, construction companies, users, maintenance firms, real estate recovery firms, reuse and remaking. So this is the first time that I'm talking about circular economy now, so that I would think that we could, or we should, consider more about this reuse and remaking and issues like that already during the start of the project. And of course also the recycling and demolition. Okay, so my view or opinion is that there should be more like holistic or systemic view in design and also collaboration between these actors. So that's why I have added these arrows there. But in addition, I think we have several new approaches in terms of technology and production, and we also could add more user orientation. So we have product innovations, we have modularity, we have industrial production available, and then if we add also users there, the result would be better. And then we need more advances on learning curve, meaning that the actors should have more than one or two projects to say that this is really an industry. And this is throughout the value chain. And then, of course, what is needed is clear communication of benefits in terms of sustainable development, because at the moment I sort of feel that it's a battle between wood and concrete, and then we have this confusion about wood or forests at the moment that I mentioned, and so on. So we need a clearer communication of benefits for wood buildings. And then I have added some buzzwords here that you see everywhere nowadays, so that we should remind this from linear to circular. So we can add open innovation and co-creation, meaning that we are taking the users and all the relevant actors with us. And then also hybrid solutions, meaning that it would be nice to see not only concrete or wood, but also hybrid, so sort of combining these different materials. Then we have concepts like sustainable urban transition, and I think this tall wood building issue fits quite well also there. And then we have also this carbon neutrality discussion going on. And I think that wood buildings have something to give also in terms of that discussion already. Okay, then I have one more chart to go. And I picked this up from a Dutch professor, Dirk Loorbach. Actually, he visited Aalto in Otaniemi 2 weeks ago, and he had in a conference there, he had a presentation, and I sort of borrowed this chart from his presentation and modified it a little. But I would think that this might be something that we could use also in terms of of the industry development for tall wood buildings. So at the moment, we could think that the old regime has something to do with concrete, for example. And then tall wood buildings, we are starting from niche here. So that we have, at the moment, we have these sort of experimentations available, and it sort of looks that it's accelerating now already. But I guess we still have to wait for the real emergence of this industry for some years. And at the same time, I would think that this wood building industry would sort of cause a destabilization effect for the concrete concrete business. So this is now my very personal thoughts, and this is really borrowed from Professor Lorbach vision. But anyway, I would think that this fits quite. He didn't talk about wood construction or construction. He was talking about sustainable businesses and sustainable transitions. But anyway, I would think that this might fit quite well, so that we would think that now at the moment we, in terms of tall wood building construction industry, we are somewhere here, and then some years or decades later, we may find ourselves there in the middle, and then ultimately or finally we could find ourselves in the mainstream. But I have no idea when that happens or how that happens, but I hope that it is possible to reach and it's possible to happen. But the sad thing is that normally these transition processes, they take several decades. So it's quite normal that I would say, should we have to wait like 30 years or so? But anyway, there is some hope. That's my sort of message. Okay, thank you.
We have been, by the way, working on that issue more than 20 years, as you mentioned yourself, from 95 when the rules changed. It seems that more I hear about things, more confused. There's plenty of interesting things. Did anybody else share that? Hopefully you did. Bjarne said that building costs are very low, but anyway the price is high. So can it be actually the building cost that are one of the barriers? Because we are talking about few hundred euros per square meter, and we read in Helsingin Sanomat today that average price in Helsinki is something like selling price is 7,000 euros.
Of course, there are the construction companies and the real estate people that want their share too. So that has something to do also with that structure. And I think in the beginning, around the millennium, I think the price was really a concern. But now I really agree with you that the price has really. The price level has come down, so that we cannot say anymore that it's more expensive to build from wood, even tall buildings. And there are, you have in your list, you have several good points, but I think we don't have time to go to that list anymore this evening.
Yeah, I also think, by the way, am I the only one that is confused, for example, use the forests, like maybe the cup in front of you, the plastic looking cup might be wood fiber, and it might be that use of wood fibers will explode, like cars, many parts of cars are wood fiber, and we use wood in fuel and everywhere, and do we have enough wood for building at all?
Yeah, here you have to fight against the fake news as well. There is so much rubbish in this whole, debate on which material. So I think your point about make hybrids is very important, because what you have seen is that the sustainable developments have gone a little bit always towards one idea. So it was cradle to cradle and then circular, and then in 5 years' time we will have the next fashion in sustainability. And I think it's much more important to, for example, as you saw in our hotel, we have a very thin base of concrete, because that solves so many problems that we can build a high wooden hotel, which so otherwise you would have a screed floor or whatever. So by using one element in it and therefore being able to have really structurally a wooden hotel, it was for us a total liberation. If we would have said in the beginning it has to be completely in wood, we probably would have ended up with much more structural elements in steel or concrete, or if we would not have built it or whatever. So I was quite happy to be very, as you said, there is no one solution anymore in the world. The world is so complex, it's much better to have hybrids and with that hybrid to make it more and more smart all the time. The stupid construction method in a way was this concrete, the slab concrete. It was just, you pour a massive amount of concrete everywhere in the world and you stack it and that's the solution. Well, it turned out it's not. So and Prouvé said you have to use any material you should use to the best, to its best qualities. And of course, you don't look through wood because you look through glass, because it's transparent. A hinge is not of wood, it's of metal. It's much better. So it is, I think, much more interesting to go to extremely intelligent hybrids. And in that sense, carbon fibers can become also very interesting, because they could be very thin and extremely strong and make strength in wooden buildings. There is this wooden building in Oslo where people, it's quite interesting, but people have this thick wooden diagonal pieces in front of their window. If that would block people from living in wooden high rises, it would maybe be better to sort of combine it and then say, okay, we can solve that.
That building, by the way, is nice inside, and you had also the stairs in front of you. Yeah. Then I was... Me neither. Then it was quite interesting that wood does quite well. People like wood, but somehow it didn't survive in the highest buildings, tall buildings. You might draw a conclusion that people like small buildings, but on the other hand, people like cities as well. And
if we think of the mega trends in the world at the moment, more and more people are living in cities, and they are living in mega cities, and we can't think of a solution that every family was living in a one family house. So we need huge buildings to solve that trend.
So we shouldn't play with the same rules as the multi-story houses in general. But now we are discussing together. Anybody out there?
I want to thank both presenters for thank you for your excellent presentations. You had a wonderful diagram about all the different suppliers and collaborators that are involved in delivering a building. And this one here. All the different players here. I wonder if you can characterize their willingness to embrace innovation, whether it's with regard to wood or anything else. Are any of these players more inclined to be innovative, or any less inclined to be innovative? Can we pinpoint the problem child, if you will?
Take the microphone. microphone. Well, perhaps the problem children, they are located somewhere here, so that it's the very conservative construction industry, and then perhaps also the real estate investors that actually they don't care so much about the material. The only thing is that they really care is the return on investment, and so of course many of the investors, they also think that it would be nice to, you know, be part of the solution to the global warming problem and other such you know, issues that we have ahead. But anyway, it's the money that talks most to them. And then it's a little bit difficult to say about these actors here because they were not actually present right now at this stage, but I would say that they should be there right from the beginning, all the actors, so that we could get this holistic or systemic view in the design already from the beginning.
You said the problem size are somewhere in here. I think here as well. This won't be the problem size. Sure, these are sometimes, I would say, like this. Problem child. Bjarne, did you agree on that, what Patrick said? It didn't sound that you did.
Probably it's more wise that I am not going to point. I know where it is. No, there is a really, really big concern that if you look very carefully around you while you travel around the globe and analyze how the world turns at the moment, economically, business-wise, it's quite shocking to see that it's all about keeping up that system as long as possible. Even Shell, a company who says to be most advanced as an old oil company, fossil fuel company, into this change. I mean, that change is like, it's like shit. They have 200 million to invest in research development, whereas they pay their shareholders, I think, 14 billion. Shell should say, this year, you don't get anything. We spent all the 14 billion, and because that's the way we're going to survive, and that's the way your stock will be at a high level also in 20 years. But they don't do it. They take a little piece. And what you see at the moment is that the machinery the industry has is all based on concrete steel. The factories are based on concrete steel. Factories are based on chemicals. Factories are based on plastics. They all have invested thousands of billions in that machinery, and that machinery wants to move on. If you see, we can plow the whole globe, I think, in about 2 years' time with all the machinery we have. It's so big, it's so incredibly big, you can't imagine. And that machinery goes on, and that's also the biggest problem. They will probably just demolish, if they can, all of Africa in about 10 years. Because they go over it with their bulldozers, scraping off what they need, build the high-rises, put the palm oil or whatever. They can do it in 10 years. And unless you don't have really good regulation. It happened in Indonesia, for example. Big parts of Indonesia are destroyed in less than 20 years. And that industry will be against this change.
Okay, to give you some hope, because he didn't give you much, but you told us about Shell, and I very much agree with you on Shell, but we, in the same industry, actually, or on a larger scale on energy, we have a very nice example of total strategic transformation, and that's from Denmark. You ever heard of a firm called DONG? It's an acronym that comes from Danish oil and natural gas. And actually, a couple of years ago, they decided that now this has been enough. We don't want to be part of the problem. We want to be part of the solution. And their new strategy is that they totally leave behind oil, natural gas, and other fossil and other dirty things, and they concentrate totally on renewables, mainly I think wind and solar and so, and also waves and other new sources that are available. But I think that's a very, very impressive example that there is still hope, even if we have these concrete fans in this industry.
I think we should keep this discussion strictly on architecture, and the benchmark idea was interesting. No problem. And I think the Hotel Jakarta that Bjarne presented could be a benchmark, because I have been at least in so many boring hotels that I would like to once visit a nice one like you did. And then secondly, about the hope, like city of Helsinki, city of Tampere, city of Turku, city of all the cities in Helsinki had been bound, stated to use more timber. They just cannot yet. And also the idea that there has to be a leading area, so one of them should, or they should start competing about leading, who is the leading area, and someday it happens. By the way, that's the last slide. Does it always happen, the curve? That can we spoil the whole business? That now it's going up nicely.
Actually, I'm not a transition researcher, so I'm not quite sure about how this should be used. But anyway, as I told you, I think this fits very well here, also in this particular case. And I would think that it's possible that we have the emergence and then we start to disappear. Of course, it's also possible. It doesn't have to be so that after the emergence comes the institutionalization and stabilization, and then we are part of the mainstream. And it's also possible that the old regime there, they sort of feel kind of chaos around them, and then after that chaos, re-institutionalization and re-stabilization takes place.
This is a beautiful scheme that shows exactly what prefab concrete made through from the 50s till now, and what happened to, let's say, prefabricated housing with other materials, because they had this breakdown of taking out. It shows exactly what happens to two different building industries.
Okay, should we let you free already? Anyway, thanks we could continue.
When are you going to vote here for European Union? Sunday. Okay, it's very, very, very important. Because that's the only thing that can make a change. If we do it like Europe. Otherwise, forget it.
Now we lost it totally. Anyway, thanks for coming, and come back in 2 weeks, Tuesday, 4th July. June? Yeah, you can come as well on July. Museum was open, but kesäkuun 4. I was just testing whether you are awake.